Okay, hello everyone. So a warm welcome to today's webinar. This is the first of this year's Centre for Online and Distance Education or CODE webinar series. We're looking forward to working with you again this year. And we have a variety of webinars, conferences and workshops coming up this year. Webinars from CODE bring together practitioners from across the globe to explore key issues in online blended and digital education. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to today's speakers, Donna Smith and Anita Skinner, and both of whom are CODE Fellows, and they're going to talk to us about top tips for online student engagement. So can I hand over to you, Donna and Anita?
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, we'll just introduce ourselves properly first of all, then we'll go through the presentation. I'm Donna Smith, and as Matt said, I'm a CODE Fellow and I'm based at the Open University.
Hello, welcome. I'm Anita Skinner. I'm CODE Fellow and I'm based at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine.
Great, thank you. And can we have the next slide, please, Matt? And is it possible for people to turn their microphones off unless they're speaking? That would be great, thank you. Next slide, please, Matt. Thank you. So the aims of this webinar are, first of all, to kind of introduce the CODE Special Engagement, Student Engagement Special Interest Group, which Anita and I lead. We're very pleased to launch our top tips for online student engagement guide, and we'll give you a link to that later. We also thought it's a really good opportunity to discuss best practice and engaging students with online teaching and learning. And at the end, there'll be a link to further resources and information as well. So please do put any kind of comments in the chat box, but I can reassure you that there will be lots of opportunities for you to feed in when we get to the kind of breakout room and discussion section later on. Next slide, please, Matt. So first of all, just to kind of introduce student engagement SIG, CODE has various special engagement groups or SIGs, and Anita and I lead the student engagement one, and there's other people involved as well. And if you look on the website using that link, you'll see who they are. And we kind of work on kind of various things and kind of various projects. Really looking at kind of the wide range of aspects and issues in relation to student engagement. Excuse me, it'd be really great if people could turn their mics off unless they're speaking. That'd be great, thank you. So we consider a wide range of aspects and issues to do with student engagement, including kind of engagement of learning materials and student community, kind of what can be called active and passive engagement, belonging, compulsory engagement, so things like kind of marks for participation and assessment, and the different kind of types of student needs and wants as well. And to look up kind of more information on the special interest group, please go to that link. So that's kind of a very kind of broad understanding of what we do. Next slide, please. Next slide, please, Matt. So we thought it'd be useful, first of all, just to kind of talk about student engagement generally and kind of give a few different definitions, because there are kind of different understandings of it. But we're kind of talking quite broadly, really. We're looking at the ways that student engagement can be interpreted in different ways. But one useful definition comes from UCL, which is a set of positive student behaviours. So this can include completing work, being involved in learning activities, interactions with students, teachers, and the wider university. And as I said earlier, the term active engagement is sometimes used, which some people will consider a kind of a problematic term, but it also can be quite useful. Because students don't necessarily need to be seen to be engaging in order to be participating. So that's why kind of active passive can be useful, but can also be contested. So why is student engagement important? Well, it has kind of an intrinsic and extrinsic value. It is a useful way potentially to check student learning, although it's definitely not the only way. It is kind of generally recognised that higher levels of student engagement do correlate to student success. Although it's not always easy to kind of pick that out, but generally the research does kind of bear that out. And obviously the Teaching Excellence Framework does highlight student engagement as a key aspect of TEF. So really, whatever we think about student engagement and kind of how we understand it, institutions do need to put student engagement front and centre, partly for those reasons. Next slide, please, Matt. Next slide, please, Matt. Great. So I think I'll pass over to Anita now for the next few slides.
Thank you, Donna. So we thought very hard about what are the best ways of getting students to engage from our experiences. And we put together a top tips for online student engagement one page. It's actually 2 pages, but the first page, as you can see, is a cover sheet sort of explaining what we're there. So these are aimed at people who are engaging with students, generally in higher education or as a teacher online. And so we wanted to produce something that was useful for everyone to sort of drop into, and a good way to start and to think about the reasons why students engage and how to encourage those. And again, this is the link on this page here to the one page that we've put together, which we're just going to outline a little bit now, and then you'll have a chance to discuss them in a minute. So next page, please, Matt. So our top tips. The first one is to make sure that the levels of engagement that you're expecting, and they will vary between different courses, and it's not a one-size-fits-all. So it's important to understand what you're expecting when you're designing the engagement, and when you review it, that actually you're not expecting too much, or maybe that you're expecting enough that the students will engage sufficiently to get what they want out of the programme. Next page, please. And to understand the sort of engagement. So not only how much you're expecting, but what sort are you looking for? Is it social? Is it understanding? Is it cognitive? Is it collaborative? Is it emotional? So there's different types of engagement which will have different results, really. So that they'll help the students to grow and to engage with others and to collaborate with others in slightly different ways. So think about what it is you're wanting to achieve by the engagement and what you think they can get out of it. So thinking more about academic and social engagement, there is a difference between them and a difference in value for each. So again, that comes back to what is it you're trying to aim to get out of the students engaging, and what do you want them to get out of it? Next, please. So the other thing that really drives engagement is if students can see that it links to their learning outcomes. Can they see why that they are engaging? What are they going to get out of it? Does it relate to their assessment? Will they get a better grade? Will they develop more wider skills? Will it make them more employable? That kind of concept. But setting the rationale, why do you want someone to do something? Why is engagement important to them? Next, please. So another thing that really helps is having a consistent structure. So if you are doing one type of activity that involves engagement in one part of the programme, make it similar so that when the students come to the next part, they understand how and when they need to engage, and what ways that you're expecting them to engage. It's a way of sort of setting the expectations so that they know how to behave, and that works for students and tutors as well. So, you know, if you've got a similar pattern of working, then that's a way that they can make space in their lives, make space in their study time, so that they can engage in a regular way and in the same way easily, so that it's not something new that they have to negotiate a new way of behaving for the next version of engagement. Next, please. Okay, so think about the different tools. There are lots of different tools, certainly since the last few years. There's lots of different tools available, and people are getting better at using different tools. Certainly some are better for asynchronous and some are better than synchronous engagement. So again, think about the students you're reaching, think about what they are able to do. I mean, is synchronous better for them? Is asynchronous better for them? Perhaps certainly my students, most of them are working full time. So actually asynchronous works really well. But you know, there is a desire to do synchronous engagement, and maybe that's better to have that at a certain time of the week, at a certain day of the week, so that people can get into the habit, thinking back to the previous one again as well. Next, please. Again, thinking about the tone and the expectations when you're introducing an activity. Be really clear. So if it's a forum task, if it's asynchronous, make it clear how and when their students are expected to engage. And that way you're setting the expectation, as I said, so that they are aware of what you expect, and they can work that into their sort of study lives and their sort of way of working as well. Next, please. So we talked, Donna talked earlier about sort of active and passive. So we thought quite a lot in our interest group about students who will be actively actively engaged in learning. So they are taking part, as in that they are engaging, but they're maybe not actually posting themselves. That doesn't mean they're not engaging with the learning. So how can you check on those students? Is it important to you to get feedback from them that they are engaging, or is it enough that you know that they might be? And those we're referring to as the passive students. Next one, please. So maybe one way is to engage those students as partners. If you give them help, a voice in developing activities, and so that they can create and extend their learning, and that has a positive. If students know that they've inputted into something, that can have a real positive impact on the whole student community, and that can really help with engagement in all forms of the activities that you're running. Next, please. So the other thing to be really clear on is how it's authentic. So is it relevant to their real life experiences? Is it something that is actually going to be that they can use, that can an important learning tool or learning skill that they can use in their everyday lives, or in wherever they hope they're going to be once they've achieved the qualification that they're working towards with you. Next, please. So this is, if you just look on the right hand side of the page here, now we've got, this is the picture of the top tips that we've put together. So we're running through them here, but you can actually access them on the link that I think somebody's put in the website. Thank you, in the chat. So another way of engaging them is to give them opportunities to ask questions which are outside of the specific activities. So that gives them a chance to feed into how you develop things. Certainly Q&A sessions can be a really good outside of a particular topic way of getting people that they feel that they're a little bit freer in how they engage with you, which might mean that they can bring something up which they don't feel is in particularly they have particularly an outlet for, but it might be something that's impeding them engaging elsewhere. So that can be a really useful way of helping people to engage on a broader level. Next, please. Again, helping people to feed in and feedback. So not everybody is happy asking questions in a sort of synchronous environment. So maybe make sure that they have opportunities to feed in and to review things, to find out what's worked well and what could work better. And that way that they can feel that they have got an input into developing the programme and to their sort of learning journeys. And that way they can feel much more engaged and will be more engaged in the future. So the other thing is to model good practice. Don't reinvent the wheel. Lots of people have got lots of experience using different methods that they find work well. Certainly work well with your specific group of students. Every group of students is different, but there might be certain characteristics that your group of students are particularly happy using. So certainly use that experience, ask your colleagues and find out what worked well for them. Thank you. Donna, over to you.
Thanks, Anita. I mean, just to say as well that all of those kind of top tips that we put together, we kind of talked about them in the kind of wider code group, the kind of wider code fellow group. There's about kind of 40 of us from kind of different institutions across the country and internationally as well. But we're not saying that these are the only top tips. They're specifically kind of geared towards online teaching and learning, although many of them will apply in face-to-face settings as well. And we're kind of very open to kind of adding to them, amending them, following on from this and kind of getting feedback generally. So this is kind of like an opening resource. It's not an end resource. So just moving on to the next slide and kind of link to that, we thought it would be interesting for people to help us, contribute to our top tips by filling in this poll. So think about what's important for successful student engagement, and we're focusing on online engagement, but you can look more generally than that if you want. So Matt, can we put that in that link in the chat, but also people can scan the QR code with their phone. And if you can then enter your thoughts, it should come out as a kind of a word cloud, and then we'll kind of use that as our starting point for our activity. So hopefully you can access that, and we'll put it in the chat ASAP, and we'll then come back and see what the word cloud looks like. So what's important for student engagement? You can think about what's important for students, obviously, but we're also happy for you to think more widely in relation to staff, institutions, things like equality and diversity. So just kind of generally anything you think of which is important for successful student engagement. So and feel free, if you can't fit it in the mentee form, to add it in the chat. That's fine too. So we'll just wait a little while for people to do that, and we'll see what appears. And I think Matt's going to share his screen in a minute to show us what it looks like. So just add as many as you want.
What is important?
Great. So hopefully you can see that on the screen, but you should also, I think, be able to see it directly on the website as well. But if not, it's on the screen, and we'll try and capture this and send a copy to you as well. So we can see the kind of in the middle of the most kind of important things, people, or kind of the most popular things people have fed in. So feedback, clarity, relevance, and purpose. I think relevance and purpose are going to be really important, because what works for one module or program or set of students might not work for another set. You need to kind of tailor it to your own purpose, your own student group. There might be some kind of common factors which are kind of obvious, and that's kind of, you know, what the kind of top tips are based on, but there might be specific kind of local things you need to kind of take account of. I see accessibility and flexibility, which I think are kind of, you know, as two sides of the same coin. Confidence, conversation, collaboration are really important. Again, I think in terms of kind of collaboration and conversation, those kind of come through on the top tips as well, and kind of working with other people, whether that's students or other members of staff, to kind of collaborate and come up with stuff which works well. I see belonging in there as well in the middle section, and there's obviously lots of academic research about belonging and kind of belonging theory, which kind of highlight how important it is, including in an online context. And I see kind of inclusion as well, motivation, trust. So I think these kind of tie in really nicely with our kind of top tips. But Matt, if you can kind of take a screenshot of that, and we can kind of put that on the website and send it out with people as well at the end.
Sorry, Donna, there are some in the chat as well, which are quite interesting. So building a cohort identity. So there's respect and I can't pronounce that.
You've got to attempt it.
Which I think are also really good things. Refresh, maybe refreshing is a good thing. So helping those who create courses to apply learning design principles. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Human-centered design approach. All really good.
I think that's the one at the end about kind of, you know, psychological safety.
Oh, sorry, thanks, Jed.
The one at the end about psychological safety for staff and students, I think is kind of really interesting as well.
Yeah,
we do need to kind of think about kind of, you know, kind of what works for students, but also what works for staff, not just in terms of kind of learning design, but also in relation to kind of you know, people being comfortable and safe, etc., etc. So
I think
so those things
is important.
Yeah.
And then, you know, coming out of the pandemic, the psychological safety is maybe not overloading everybody as well, would be maybe a different sort of element as well.
So we'll use this, as I say, we'll send it out to people as well. We'll take a screenshot and send it out, and we'll take a further look at this when we kind of, as part of our kind of general work, and see if we need to kind of add anything or kind of, highlight anything, emphasize anything, etc. But we will take that and all of the chat stuff on board in relation to that. So Matt, if we can go back to the PowerPoint slide, I think we're going to go kind of have the kind of general discussion now in breakout rooms. So we thought it would be really useful for people to consider what we've said in our top tips, consider some of the kind of most common answers people gave on the Mentimeter, and then in small groups, breakout rooms, discuss 2 questions. Best practice for student engagement. So is there anything missing in our top tips? Is there anything there that you think needs to be amended? We're open to all suggestions. And then technology to help engagement. So make notes on the tablet, or one person make notes on the tablet or Padlet rather, and then we'll call you back to feedback at the end. Okay. I think you're being added to the rooms as we speak. So you might find yourself popping up in a room all of a sudden.
Yeah, I'm just going to make the rooms now. How many would you like in each room, Donna?
We've got about, should we say 10 in a room?
10 in a room?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so I've got 8 breakout rooms and I'm just opening them now.
Okay, we're just waiting for everyone to come back. Nearly there.
About 30 seconds before they all close. So just wait a little bit longer. Having a look at the Padlet, it looks like you had a lot of good discussions. Does anyone have any feedback on that?
So, okay, 6 seconds to go.
In our group, we discussed that engagement is rather different in face-to-face than online, and it needs a different approach.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, thank you. We're probably going to call on some groups to feedback, actually. We've got kind of 8 to 10 breakout groups, which is probably going to be too many for each group to kind of feedback individually. I think we said that we would kind of, each group had a number. Hopefully you know what group you're in. But if you don't, it's not a big problem. Because people were in a group at least. So it'd be really useful if people could feedback any kind of key discussions they had, any kind of key points. So I'm going to start with randomly start at the beginning. So we'll start with group 1. If people know what group they're in, and just to say that we are sharing the Padlet on the screen, but you should all have access to it as a group as well on the kind of web link. So if you can't see it on the shared screen, just go direct to the Padlet link, and we can put the Padlet link back in the chat again, just in case. So does anyone from group 1 want to feedback? Anyone in group 1, or just anyone randomly want to kind of put a hand up from one of the groups, in case you don't know what group you're in, and kind of feedback any kind of key points? So anyone want to put their hand up?
Do we want to think about the first question first, maybe?
Yeah.
I've just put the Padlet link back in the chat as well, so there's lots of copies of it now there. Okay, so with this, this is about engagement, so hopefully we'll get some engagement. Anyone want to kind of feedback? Okay, I can see a hand up there. Do you want to speak? Just unmute your microphone.
Hi, I'm Farhia. Hi. One of the things that I thought was really useful from our discussion was that a lot of engagement is affected by class sizes. So if you have 70 or 80 or 100, it's really hard to develop cohort identity. Some of the suggestions around fixing that is maybe to break the class into smaller groups and then build an identity and relate and increase engagement that way. But somebody else pointed out very accurately to this now that you have to think about how to do that if it's an online class or if it's a face-to-face class. So that is another one of the subtleties that we need to think about when we're thinking about student engagement.
Thanks. That's a really good point. I don't think we have that on our top tips as a specific point. We have kind of about kind of considering, I think, kind of different kind of individual factors which might relate, but we haven't got that specific one. I think what's really interesting in relation to that, and I know in my own university, the Open University, we could have really small groups, we could have really huge groups online, and as you say, it does have an impact. And it also depends what it is you're trying to do. So like a really big group might be fine for a lecture, but not fine for kind of more interactive stuff unless you kind of break it up, and also might depend on what it is you're trying to do. So lots of people feeding into a discussion forum might be okay. The kind of the volume might mean you get the kind of participation, but then also it might discourage people potentially from feeding back if they see lots of activity. They might feel a bit kind of overwhelmed. So I think that's a really good point, and kind of each person's kind of individual context, I think, is kind of relates to that as well. David, you've got your hand up. Did you want to speak in relation to that, or a different point?
We talked a lot in our group about, particularly in an online environment such as this, kind of like, whether sometimes the policy is everybody should have their cameras on or everybody should have their cameras off. And Andrew in our group made the point that for him, so obviously teaching in an online environment, this, if he's kind of the lecturer and he's kind of perhaps doing something more like a traditional lecture, but he's greeted with just a screen full of blank screens because of everybody's got their cameras off, it can be really, really hard to kind of gauge what the level of engagement is from the participants. And of course, that can then have a kind of a knock-on effect from his teaching, because well, if you can see their faces, if you're in a lecture theatre, for example, you might be able to sort of see like, okay, the students are starting to look like they're zoning out a little bit or something. Maybe it's time for a break or something like that. So we had a lot of discussion around that in particular, but also, around that, we talked about those kind of passive students that you mentioned, that even though they might be sat there with the camera off and maybe their mic off, they might actually be very much engaging. They're just listening and kind of absorbing what's going on rather than doing something sort of more participative. And we had perhaps a couple of thoughts on ways you could perhaps kind of mitigate some of that. I mean, I suggested, for example, perhaps more of a flipped learning approach, where perhaps you do more of that kind of passive learning before the online session, and then you give it more time in the online session for more active, more activities with it involves participation. Another suggestion as well was actually in your online session that you build in sort of regularly at regular points throughout your session more sort of interactive elements, whether that be discussion or chatting or maybe using a poll or something like that, to kind of break it up and ensure that there are opportunities to participate and engage, rather than kind of sort of like a more sort of passive sort of sitting there listening to a lecture online for an hour or so.
Yeah, thanks. That's really really great feedback. I think the thing that stands out to me in particular is this discussion about cameras on, cameras off. And I've seen kind of lots of discussion from students and also staff about that. And there's so much, isn't there, to take into account in relation to that. I mean, often people turn their cameras off to make the connection more stable. We've probably all been in meetings where someone says, "I'm just going to turn my camera off so it doesn't disturb, the technology." But also at the same time, when you're presenting, as you say, seeing those kind of squares, black squares, can be a bit disconcerting. But also sometimes students, who might feel nervous, might feel better with their camera off. So there's kind of pros and cons, and so many kind of different views to take into account. One thing I often do, which won't work in all contexts, but I often might have cameras on at the start for people to kind of say hello, while not making it compulsory, and then kind of build in those kind of opportunities to kind of interact as we go on. So if someone asks a question, ask them to put the camera on, polls, writing on the whiteboard, that kind of thing. But whatever technique you choose, it is something you really have to kind of think about. I think it's kind of less natural than it is in a kind of face-to-face setting. You do have to take these things into account in a face-to-face setting too, but it's something about the online where you have to kind of think about it a bit more and kind of build it in and kind of plan it from the start, which I think makes it a little bit different.
Sorry, Donna, I think another thing that actually talks to is the non-verbal communication, which is really hard to try and compensate for when you haven't got it particularly. And I think that's absolutely in certain places, getting the connectivity is really important. you know, you'd rather have them with no screen on than have to cut out. But actually, I think that's a really, I don't know how we do it actually particularly, but not that non-verbal side of communication is something that we miss a lot with the online side. Sorry.
No, that's great. I think Johnny Lee is next.
Yeah, so I am from Group 7, and I'm building on the points we've just discussed. We also agreed and echoed that polling is really important to get students' attention. And also, we discussed the presence of the educator in the camera, because there is one academic from Brown University, and then he mentioned putting a really short introductory video at the beginning of the online course, so that gives students more confidence. It's like building the educator presence in a remote environment, and we believe that could keep students engaged. And also put a summary video at the very end with educators' presence as well, because as other participants are saying, non-verbal communication is an important part of the whole initiative to keep students engaged.
So when you talk about putting a video at the end, can you just explain a little bit more what you mean?
Oh, what I mean is not just at the very first beginning, maybe put some wrap-up video at the end. So is at the beginning, they see the educator and then they have some exercises online or synchronous, asynchronous activities, and then they see the educator again. That could tie the whole learning experience together and let them build a connection through non-verbal communication.
I get what you mean. So you kind of have a mixture of kind of asynchronous and synchronous, and opportunities to kind of see people's faces, and then kind of, you know, build that in a kind of across the course, as a way of kind of building that kind of contact with students. Absolutely. I can see, I think it's Georgina next.
Hi everyone. Yeah, we talked about similar themes, I think, in our group. I can't remember what number it was, sorry. So we talked about the importance of group size, also the importance of anonymity, I think, for students. So things like Mentimeter kind of really work well because they allow that. I think also valuing all types of interactions really important. So actually just kind of, you know, thumbs up and smiley faces are great, and it shows that a student's listening and taking part. And I guess not having a hierarchy as to which type of engagement is better, because it might be kind of dependent on the student and their particular needs. I think as I think it was Johnny who said, you know, the educator presence is really important, and I think the kind of the barriers between sort of the academic and social aspects of learning break down actually in the online space, and I think kind of having, you know, pets appear online or kids or whatever kind of interruptions are actually quite useful, because they kind of humanize the educator and help to kind of break down some of those barriers. I think you have to plan spontaneity online, which kind of sounds counterintuitive, but I don't think it happens naturally. So I think you have to kind of plan that quite carefully for students. And then I think kind of our sense is that students need help both actually in kind of face-to-face settings and in online sessions much more than they ever did, in terms of actually just talking to each other. So I think there's some kind of pandemic effect there that's playing out on students. So things that kind of sound quite structured but help students to kind of just start those discussions is really, really useful. So I've tried this year something called a CLIP, which I can never get right. It's a cooperative learning interaction pattern. So it sounds really structured and dull, but you actually give students kind of sentence stems that they finish themselves as part of a discussion, and do it in a very structured way. So someone's timing and each person has to speak for a minute or 2 minutes. And it does kind of create quite a buzz, and does mean that everybody speaks. So things like that, I think, can work quite nicely as well.
That sounds really interesting. Yeah. I think lots of really good points there. Thank you. But I like that idea of the, what was it? What did you call it again? The CLIP.
CLIP is much easier to say it, but it stands for Cooperative Learning Interaction Patterns.
Yeah, no, I like
and
that
they're
idea.
just quite nice. Yeah.
Yeah, that's quite useful, because I think you're right. It is once people are sort of kind of there, actually getting them to actually then move on to the next stage can be quite difficult. And I think, you know, certainly the pandemic effect is definitely there. I run Rainbows, which are little brownies, and you see it in all of them as well. Thank you. Christine.
Hi, hello. So yes, I arrived late, so I wasn't really in a group. I sort of caught the end of group 1, but I wanted to go back to someone mentioned anonymity, and I think that's a really good way of getting especially shy students to engage, and especially if you get at an activity like, for instance, with a Padlet, where the students post anonymously and rate each other's posts anonymously. The shy students that get people voting for their post might feel more confident that they can express that, orally rather than just in writing anonymously.
Yeah, I think part of that building confidence is quite interesting, and that I think that feeds back to the first speaker who was talking about belonging. It's a lot of them, I think, are about how we manage to create that belonging feeling and maybe some sort of confidentiality feeling, so that they do feel safe, so that they can interact. Cam?
Yes, hello everyone. Very, very good points so far. And indeed, we've also covered quite a lot of them in our group. And I do apologize, I can't remember what group I was in. But without perhaps repeating, we've also had a conversation in our group about creating a safe environment. And what we can do, as educators, we can just simply use sentences such as, there is no silly questions, there is no stupid questions, feel free to just share your thoughts and things like that. Sort of, just using this sort of simple sentences can help people to kind of break up a little bit that sort of being shy. Obviously using tools such as Mentimeter work really great for a bit more sort of introverted nature students, if you like. Well, talking about engagement, we also mentioned about capturing data, because obviously you have a group of, imagine 30 or 40 students, and let's say out of the whole cohort, only 10 can be very engaging, but what about the rest of the cohort? I think it's important to kind of sort of have some sort of tool maybe that will help you measure the engagement, but not just only in one sort of platform, across maybe different platforms. I think we should look at engagement sort of from different perspectives and different sides. So maybe I personally think not just only during the during the session, so synchronously, but also asynchronously. As I said, we always have to give a chance to students who are a bit more introverted, who are not so openly talking about their views with the rest of the cohort, and they surprisingly can be even more engaging, but we can just change the mode basically of the delivery. So for example, by typing, so discussion boards and things like that can work a treat for them to see their presence. We also had a quick chat about students having their cameras switched on and off, and I think a lot of us will agree that is great when students have their cameras switched on, because we can see them on the screen, but it's not the end of the world if they don't have them switched on. It's just as long as they they can actually say things, I suppose that's really good. We also looked at different types of engagement. So for example, using and I think someone's already mentioned this, using reactions, so things like that. Do you also, imply that there is some sort of engagement from students? So we just have to look kind of a bit more broadly at engagement rather than just specific element, as in like just how much students, talk about certain topic. And therefore it's good to have a variety of different tools as well.
All very good points. Yes, and I think it is. If that a lot of all of those comments are about group management, which is really quite difficult sometimes, especially when you haven't got the interaction of when where people are. Sorry, my phone's ringing. Shush. Sorry. So when you're in the same room as somebody, it's really hard to sort of not you kind of have to interrupt, don't you, really, to sort of do that group management thing. But I think it's really difficult when someone is really shy to try and sort of encourage them to engage a bit more.
Of course.
So yeah, lots of really good points. Thank you. Vimal.
Hello, yes. So from Group 7. My name is Vimal, and we had a very lovely gentleman, Mike Howard. I think he's still with us, if I'm correct. He suggested stimulating the students with different angles, not just your view, but he had, I think, some sort of equipment which allowed him to change his camera inputs. And he had like a side profile, front profile, and also a profile of his iPad input notes that he was taking that could be sort of put up on screen.
Vimal, sorry to interrupt. I don't know if you can see it, but we're getting all of that from Mike at the moment.
Okay.
She's quite interesting.
Yeah.
No, that's really good. That's a
so
really good
I think they were quite valid points, and I think one of the things I've noticed right now as well in our engagement is I think there's a technology overload as well at point where students are having to interact, and likewise even the tutor is having to deal with so many different interactions. So as opposed to having everybody's video cameras on now and just a few makes such a difference. So cognitive overload of technology, I think pre-planning your lectures, if they're going to be sort of engaging lectures, pre-planning if there's going to be sort of breakout rooms or not. So people expect, they know what's going to happen. I read before this webinar that there were going to be interaction sort of breakout rooms. So I was kind of prepared for that. I was ready. At the beginning, when you began, I didn't put my camera on because it wasn't necessary. So making those decisions and judgments, calls are important. I think those are great tips to take along as to when we use the certain kind of interaction that we need. So I think there must be etiquette and on that, and there must be sort of value to it when putting on your camera or mic. We know very clearly for the microphone, it's the same for your image and what you're presenting as your image at what time. Is it your tablet with notes that you're presenting? Is it your screen that you're presenting? Is it a wider profile of your room and your desk? Is that giving a sort of opinion of, or are you serious about this or not? So there's a lot of
some people might not be in a position that what they're presenting is what they want to present.
Yes.
So somebody in the chat was saying something about there's a whole thesis on people, this is slightly different, but not wanting to engage in breakout rooms. I wondered if I can't find it now. I wonder if whoever that was wanted to.
That was me.
Yeah, we've got 4 minutes left, so can you quickly summarize that as well?
I just think again that there's a lot of people who don't know. It might be fear of not knowing what's involved. And I think sometimes for the learner, it's back to the kind of idea of the power between the facilitator and the learner. So it's kind of, Anita's going to put me into breakout rooms, but what does Anita want? I think maybe establishing what the agreement is before you go into breakout groups would really help people kind of understand.
Yeah, setting the expectations really clearly. Yeah. So
maybe that's my 30 seconds.
Thank you, Gina.
Thank you, Anita.
Thank you. Donna, have we got time for the last two more comments? I can't remember what your name is. First hand up.
I think we've got time if they're kind of fairly brief, and we can always follow up and by email with people if you don't have time.
Okay.
That was me, Farhia, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, very quickly. A lot of the discussions about camera is really interesting, but it's really ignoring something that somebody who's privileged to have a room with an office, with privacy, whereas students, you don't know their socioeconomic background, what's happening. They might have to put in their laptop wherever, or their phone, wherever they're joining from, in a very uncomfortable place. There might be a legitimate reason why they don't want their camera on. So having an online etiquette is good, but you need to take that into account. And I agree with the last gentleman's point that you need to have the camera on or off. It shouldn't be a hierarchy. It should be used when it's appropriate. So I just want to point that out and don't want to lose track of that some of us are more privileged than others and students shouldn't be disadvantaged.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Jed?
Yeah, it'd be nice to finish on an up note. It would be very good to circulate what is most engaging, what is the effective practice that we can emulate. It would be nice to add it to my own practice. And so if anyone has examples, particularly if it's based upon data that shows a particular process or practice or resource or style of resource is more engaging than any other part of the materials that they work with, it would be good to have insight into that.
Thanks so much, Jed. And what we're going to do after this is we can go back to the presentation, Matt. We've only got one more slide, really. We're going to send round the PowerPoint presentation, which has all the kind of links to the top tip sheet and kind of further resources, etc. We're also going to send round a link to the Padlet so people can see everything which people have kind of put on there. So kind of hints and tips, links to kind of technology, etc. We will also have a look in the chat box to see what people have said, and if there's anything in there people suggest, send that round as well. Do take a look online. There's the link, and do take a look at our kind of student engagement SIG more generally. We're very happy to kind of take feedback by email as well, if you have any kind of further comments you have about anything. And just to kind of highlight at the end as well, because we told Code, we were happy to do so, that there is actually going to be a Code conference in 2024. And if you, again, use the QR code on the presentation, which we'll send around, it will take you to the website. So please do take a look at that, because if you're interested in student engagement and other related subjects, we hope you will find that conference really interesting and useful. So thank you so much for everyone's feedback. I mean, I know that Anita and I, talking of engagement, when you do these things, you never know if you're going to get it right. You never know if you're going to get the attendance, the engagement. Is the technology going to work? We made a mistake at the start. We should have had people's microphones automatically turned off when people arrived. We didn't do it. So we're all learning. We all kind of make mistakes, and there's all things that we can improve on as we kind of go on. So these sessions are kind of really helpful, not just in relation to students, but I think in relation to staff as well, and helping us to kind of improve our understanding of engagement for the students and the staff as well. So that's all been really useful. Thank you for attending, and we'll send stuff around to you. Thank you.
Donna,
Thanks, Anita. Sure.
Can I just say, I was just wondering if there's somewhere that we can gather what Jed was suggesting, that where people have actually got data as to what really works. Maybe we can think about maybe adding that, some way of gathering that at the end of the
well, we can have a think about the best place to put that, because we do have a student engagement page on the website, so maybe we can think about if we can put it on there, or perhaps Linda can suggest somewhere a bit more useful. But yeah,
it would definitely be good to share what works. Shared practice is
definitely
great. So okay,
thank you everyone, we really appreciate it, and look out for our emails.
Thank you very much.
Thanks everyone. Bye bye. Have a good day.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.